Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey, and welcome to the last show of this week. And what a week. I can't... And we got the, the State of the Union to get through tonight. God help us all. And I mentioned yesterday that I thought my memory was correct, that the State of the Union had been the same sort of thing for some time. It turns out that Harry Truman was the first to have his State of the Union televised, I believe. LBJ was the first to bring it into prime time. It wasn't necessarily there. But I was right that it was Ronald Reagan, of course, who started the in the audience thing. So before that, there had never been some people sitting in the First Lady's box who were there to personify something that the president wants personified, and it's only, of course, grown from there. But also, I think this was in the New York Times. They did sort of a historical review of these State of the Union addresses, and if you want to know when civility died, when decorum died, you might think maybe during the Iraq War, but you'd be wrong, because even at the height of the Iraq War, with all the acrimony going on, George W. Bush began his address by saying that he had the high privilege of addressing the first female speaker of the first president to say Madam Speaker, and the whole place rises and applauds. And never during his speech, no matter what he says that might have made the Democrats go berserk, there's no interruptions. When did the interruptions begin? Well, when that upstart black guy with a strange name became president. That's when it began. And of course, it began with Republicans. You lie. Remember that? How shocked we were? That guy, that Republican congressman, shouting at the president during the State of the Union address. You lie. My God, we were stunned. That was the same, it was 2010, that was the same State of the Union address where Justice Alito, in his black robe, didn't shout out, "You lie," but was seen on camera clearly mouthing, you could read his lips easily, shaking his head and saying, "Not true." And then after Obama, it went south with Trump. He refused to even shake Madam Speaker's hand, let alone acknowledge her in his final State of the Union address. And that is the address where there was much more attention paid to the fact that after the address, she stood up and ripped her copy of his speech in half. But it was rarely recounted what he had done to her at the beginning. And then you had President Biden in 22 interrupted while he was talking about his dead son, interrupted by Lauren Boebert. So I understandably am leery about what tonight will bring, and I am not looking forward to it in any way, since we now have such awful, awful loss. It's a terrible loss of any sense of decorum. So there's that. Um, oh, so much here. I must say, this new economy, the technological economy, has brought us many things that are good, obviously, but the negatives are just, I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like much of it. I don't like the fact that so many people have acquiesced to having everything they want when they want it. And so these trucks ply our streets and neighborhoods 24/7, dropping off commodities, things, stuff that we, the American consumer, want. Gone are the days when you had to actually get up. Remember when you had to get up to change the channel on your TV? I mean, technology makes you soft. It makes it easier for you to sit on your ass all day. And that's not good. But what happened to me last night just, I thought, was a distillation of so much of what I don't like about this convenience economy. I was walking my dog. It was a little after 8 p.m. It was dark and it was raining. And I loved the fact that it was dark and it was raining because nobody was out. I felt like I had the world to myself. I was perfectly happy. I often remind myself that rain is water, and that's no big deal. So we walked and we're enjoying ourselves. And then a truck came around the corner and stopped like almost in front of us. And it was, of course, an Amazon Prime truck. And the guy jumps out. I sort of nodded at him as we continued on. And darned if he sort of followed us. He didn't, I felt followed, but that truck went, literally stopped about every 3 houses. Every 3 houses. So everybody, on that one street last night, got deliveries. He'd get in the truck, he'd pull up maybe 3, 4 houses, he'd get back out, he'd pull up 3 more houses. Then, I lost him for a while because we turned a corner, but I came back and damn, he was now backing up and also stopping and continuing to deliver. And as I turned onto my street, damn if he didn't back up into my street. He didn't come. I thought, geez, well, he must. I was wondering if his forward movement, his drive was screwed up. What's he going backwards for? He goes backwards onto my street. And I'm thinking, oh, he's just turning here and he's going to pull back out onto the larger street. But that's not what happened. He just kept backing. And I'm walking with my dog on the street. There's no sidewalk on this street. And he is sort of like, so I sort of stalled. I stopped and waved at him, trying to get his attention, saying, I'm here. We don't have lights. I'm here. I could not see that he acknowledged me. And in fact, he seemed to turn the truck toward me. So I and the dog took off. I mean, now I really was feeling chased. And damn if that truck didn't follow us all the way to my house, making 2 more stops. And when I finally ran into the house, he was still backing down my street. He ends up in front of the neighbors across from me. And I sat down to write a note to myself about this. And I just said, he's still out there, amber and red lights flashing. And I'm in my house and he's still out there. And then slowly, he actually started to go forward and was gone. But I'm thinking, what an odd and what an odd reality that there are people now who work all night because of our insatiable need for immediate gratification. I try so hard to shop in brick and mortar. I try so hard not to use these services. I mean, my street is a quiet street except for the constant. What is it we all need so badly, so much? And we need it so badly, so much that we've managed to put out of business so many of our neighbors and ma and pa stores, stores with personality and individuality. I just hate it. And I hope more of you would stop aiding and abetting it. Please! Well, that brings me to, did you see the TSA is going to have self-serve. They're trying it out at the Las Vegas airport. TSA passengers will be able to check themselves through security. Put their bags through the scanners and what? We're supposed to know. So, what they say when they tell you this stuff, they say, and this will allow the TSA employees to set their own pace and not be as frazzled. No, it won't. They'll just have fewer, just like at the self-checkout at the grocery store. It's just another way that we are being taught to replace people. And then I saw that in England, I think it is, where this is going on, there is a new, this was in a scientific journal, God help us, and the robotic engineers have created a nursing assistant that will, with 2 hands, I can't, when they say hands, I can't imagine what those hands are, but 2 hands will be able to dress people. What a dystopian image comes to mind. We already treat old, infirm, disabled people like problems. We warehouse them. We put them in facilities that are understaffed by humans. And now we're going to bring robots into the mix. And I got to tell you, I cannot imagine my mental state if I found myself in an institution in a bed being dressed by a robot. The excitement of the scientists and how they realize that one hand of the robot holds the patient's hand and the other guides the arm into a sleeve. And again, the same report goes off on how this will allow the human staff to do more important things like interact with the patients in a more human to human emotional way. We'll be able to not be bothered with these dressing and feeding and that kind of thing, and they'll be able to just be wonderful humans helping these institutionalized old discarded people. And you know that's not true. Staffs will be reduced. Those people who work in nursing homes will not find themselves with time to talk to the patient. They will find themselves on the unemployment line. And that's the reality. And I'm so sick of how we're just going forward into this dystopian reality and not blinking. Oh boy. Okay. What else do I have? Oh my, the bravery of these Russian people. God bless them. We in America are now seeing that bravery and courage are not something that there's a surplus of. I'm blown away still by how every Republican office holder has now bent the knee. Are there any hold? Well, we do know that the 2 female senators, Murkowski and Collins, have. Well, but no, they will. They'll end up endorsing. They endorsed Haley. She's not gonna. That doesn't matter. They'll end up falling in line too, I suspect. Mitch McConnell's fallen in line. He loathes Donald Trump. I see that the Republican who will be running against Bob Casey, our senator, McCormick, he has endorsed Donald Trump because you have to. No displays of courage. None. Almost zero. So to see Russians knowing they're being watched, knowing there are cameras taking their pictures, knowing because technology has given the police and authoritarian governments facial recognition, they've come and they continue to come by the thousands and thousands. They wait in line to get into the cemetery where Alexei Navalny is buried. And if you've seen any pictures of his burial site, there are flowers piled so high that I don't even know how anyone's getting them on top anymore. And every one of those people is jeopardizing their freedom. Truly. A freedom that in America has come to mean I get to do whatever I want to do when I want to do it. Boy, it's really something, though. Really something. So, I wanted to wait. Hang on. I'm sorry. Again, too many screens. We're fine. By the way, you can call if you want. I got this down pretty much. Just running it by myself, and I suppose the longer I go, the less distracted I will be. I am hoping. So they took a picture of a bird. Man, have you seen it? It's the most beautiful bird in, I forget where, Colombia, South America, I think. And the bird is a green honey creeper. And I bring it up because ornithologists are going crazy about this bird because it is a rare bird. I mean, there's other green honey creepers around, but there ain't any green honey creepers like this one that anybody's seen and taken a photo of. And it's different. It looks different than the others. It's beautiful. You could even say it's more beautiful. The left side of its body is shimmering green feathers. Beautiful, beautiful, bright green, which is the classic coloring for females of the species. Its right side, however, is iridescent blue, which is what males of the species are. So this bird, the picture of which I saw, is right down the middle, is male on one side and female on the other. Now, this is not the first time this has been seen, and in fact is seen in other animals, but it's rare to see them to be able to, wow, there's one, there they are. And generally what they found, if they find a dead one and can open it up, is that it will have internal sex organs that match the plumage, so that it'll have an ovary on one side and testes on the other. And they know through observation over the years, although again, rare observation, that these, what are called gynandromorphic birds, can successfully court and reproduce. My God, they could successfully court themselves and reproduce, maybe. Anyway, I was just saying, so again, this sense that humans, you know, could not have these kinds of variations is absurd. It occurs in nature and is observable in nature. And the birds tend to do well, although this particular green honey creeper, they said, was never observed engaging in courtship or mating behavior and tended to hang back from feeding stations until other birds had departed. So it felt maybe, or it was ostracized. Can't imagine humans doing something so absurd for somebody who by birth is different. But there you have it. You heard about the guy who got 217 COVID vaccines? Well, better safe than sorry, I guess he was thinking. I don't know. As a German guy. And he somehow avoided whatever the restrictions were and just kept getting more and more and more and more doses. 217 when they finally said, hey, cut it out. But could we study you? And so after months of studying him, scientists in Germany determined that there was no indication of any negative effects to this guy. He reported he never had any side effects. And he had all kinds of different ones. He got Johnson & Johnson, he got the other one, he got a third one, he got any ones he could do, give it to me, I'm taking them. And what they found, not surprisingly to me, but I don't know about immunology, it says here, his repertoire of antibodies and immune cells was considerably larger than that of like you or me, than somebody who's just followed the rules and been vaccinated as we are supposed to. But they say that it shows how robust our immune systems are to repetitive immunization. And for those in this crazy time of listening to, again, the internet or Robert F. Kennedy effing Jr., that when you hear they're telling older people now to get another in the spring, in a month or so, do it. Nothing bad's gonna happen. You'll just be more immunized. This guy lived in this country, man, would he'd be getting what? In every way harassed, intimidated, threatened by the anti-vax crowd. Because that's the way we do things around here now. We intimidate. We live in toxic masculinityville. We think Donald Trump is the epitome of masculinity. We think masculinity is about anger and vengeance and payback and crudity, not crudité. Heavens, not crudité. Which brings me to the big to-do over the fact that Jason Kelce sobbed through his speech that he gave, hanging it up officially with the Eagles. He started crying before he even opened his mouth. He sat down, this huge, hulking, I mean, if he doesn't look like the epitome of masculinity, I'd like to know. I mean, our stupid sense of masculinity. And that big bearded guy sits down and sobs his way. He cried when he cried when he talked about his teammates. He cried when he even talked about other people crying and started crying. He was talking about his father, seeing his father cry, and he started crying again. And then, good God, when he had to talk about his younger brother, that'd be Travis. He said, "Oh gosh, this is where it's going to go off the rails," and oh boy, did it ever! Just sobbing. Meanwhile, Travis, who he's talking about, is in the front row wearing sunglasses, trying to hide the fact that he's crying. But since tears run downhill, he wasn't able to. So there are these big Kelce boys just sobbing. And so now, because we live in this age of, influencers, these two are now like huge influencers. And what they're telling guys is you can cry. It's okay to cry and you can still be masculine. That was not necessarily the truth just like a decade ago. So I'm thinking of Tom Hanks in A League of Their Own saying, "There's no crying in baseball." Well, maybe not, but there sure is crying in football. Uh, so a lot of people, in the scientific sociology, psychology area say that they're showing, and this is good, that you can be a tough, strong guy and emotional at the same time and show pain and joy and sorrow. But another guy in the field said, "Well, I'm not so sure. These guys, these athletes, get a pass because, I mean, look, they have the masculinity chops. They're big, muscled, and they make a living knocking other big muscled men down. So for the average guy, there probably still is this sense of shame around crying. It's not an easy thing to move away from." Uh, oh, Gigi sent me something about a local gynandromorph, one of these birds of two sexes that was observed at the Powder Mill Nature Reserve. Yeah, so they're out there. Oh, it doesn't let me. I I hate that when you try to somebody sends you something and then you're told, "Oh no, that is not a secure connection. We just can't let you. If you want to go ahead and then have your identity stolen and all that stuff, you just go right ahead, baby. We ain't gonna stop you." Um, Another thing I saw that just freaked me out was, I know it's hard for us to keep all the mass killings in this country, in our heads. There are so many, but remember the one in Maine, uh, which that guy killed how many people? It was a biggie, even by our standards. Um, and I can't remember, but it was a ton of people. He killed. He went berserk, and then I guess he killed himself. Uh, it turns out that they've looked at his brain, and his brain was a nightmare. the inside of his brain. There was so much damage in it. There were places where things that are supposed to be there weren't. It wasn't chronic traumatic encephalopathy, but it was severe damage. Tissue that was supposed to insulate areas just, they say, were lying in disorganized clumps throughout his brain. His brain was scarred. There was inflammation, which suggested to the doctors, just repeated trauma to the brain. You know what this guy did in our military? He was a grenade instructor. A grenade instructor in the Army Reserve. And he had 8 years of being exposed to thousands of skull-shaking blasts on the range where he was training others. His family noticed he was getting weird. He got paranoid, he heard voices, and then he grew increasingly violent. And then he blew away 18 people. I wonder if our military is, I hate to think this is not a one-off, I'm sure. And I hate to think how many other people might, as we speak, because they're serving our nation, are incurring this kind of grievous damage to their brains. Okay. I'm trying to, let me see what we got here. Would you mind if I read you something? It's something, I'm always reading, and then I paraphrase, and this is something I just don't want to paraphrase. And it is, it's I guess you call it I don't know, is it a blog? It's somebody who writes about, mostly about being a Jew, and Israel. But she had an encounter that is so amazing. And I want to share it because it takes us through the way we interact when we violently disagree with one another. And somehow it didn't end like it usually ends. And it made me feel a small measure of hope. But I don't know. She says this, and I hope you'll just let me read. My friend, L, she doesn't give her full name, was in town to play music last night, and this morning we met for coffee. She's a Sephardic Jew, meaning a Jew whose ancestors, whose family traces back to Spain, also northern parts of Africa, as opposed to Ashkenazi Jews who are Eastern Europe mostly. Okay. Okay. She's a Sephardic Jew, and we were at a table in a corner talking about the war. She's a generation younger than me at 37, and she has also spent years living and working with Palestinians in East Jerusalem. In recent years especially, I have come to loathe Netanyahu and the far-right members of his cabinet. And of course, I harbor fury and seething frustration toward the extremist Jewish settlers. But my friend's loathing of them has been directly informed by her day-to-day experiences, and it is even more immediate, visceral, and ardent than mine. So we're talking about the war, and by sheer surreal chance, sitting at the very next table is a Palestinian man. He cuts in, and we start a three-way conversation that becomes considerably heated. But the reason it stayed civil is that Elle has an extraordinary ability to deeply empathize with both of us, and she is quick to validate a lot of his testimony. And yet she also took issue with other things he said, such as characterizing Hamas as revolutionaries or freedom fighters. Within a few minutes, the man was joined by his mother and adult sister. So it's now a five-way convo that quickly overheats past any constructive exchange. The man gets up and walks out to the street, but Elle wants to continue her conversation, so she follows him out to the sidewalk. Meanwhile, my exchange with these two women devolves into fierce acrimony. They truly did not believe that Hamas committed atrocities like rape, dismemberment, and burning people alive. They told me it was just bullshit propaganda, and it's all been debunked. I said, okay, this is going nowhere good, and I'm going to join my friend. The sister then said, leave, get out right now. I said, I already told you I'm going, very much of my own accord. But do you seriously think you have the right to order me out of this coffee house? She leapt up from her chair and got right in my face, screaming, get out of here right now. I stepped even closer to her, so there was barely a millimeter of space between us, and said, what are you gonna do? It was that far gone. Unseemly. Insane. We stood staring at each other for many, many long seconds, and then she dropped back into her seat, and I went out to join Elle and the brother. We stood talking as the rain came down. Within a few minutes, we were joined by his mother. Then his sister emerged, crying, and went to their car. With Elle as our simultaneous interpreter, so to speak, on an emotional level anyway, the four of us just kept talking. Eventually, even the sister got out of the car, came over, and we stood in the icy rain for literally 90 minutes to 2 hours, talking and talking and talking and talking. Elle was the closest to occupying some emotional middle ground, and she had a wildly attuned and intimate understanding of what each person was hearing in response to another person's rhetoric. She also knew in exactly which ways we each idealized our own side. One of them would say something like how great JVP is, and I don't know what that is. JVP is, and she would wince and then say, yes, but here is what Alyssa, who is the woman writing, is experiencing when you say that. But she also corroborated aspects of their experience of the Israeli government that I had not known about and found hard to believe. Listening to her was truly a master class in mediation, because she even had the keenest awareness of the differences between herself and me. She would say things like, Alyssa is 17 years older than me, and she's been steeped in the impossibility and despair and darkness of this conflict for twice as long as I have. And unlike my generation, she grew up in the direct shadow of the Holocaust. She was raised in part by a survivor of Auschwitz. I have rarely felt so exquisitely understood and translated. And by the same token, she was able to translate certain aspects of their experience to me in a way I otherwise would not have been able to absorb. The rain soaked through my coat, it soaked through my clothes, and eventually I felt soaked to the bone, but still, we stood there and talked and talked and talked and talked. It was striking how much emotional territory we shared. Emotional territory that few, if any, white Western liberals could ever approach. They were mourning their dead. We were mourning our dead. They were appalled and aggrieved by our civilian deaths, and we were appalled and aggrieved by their civilian deaths. They felt everyone sympathized with Israel and demonized Palestinians, and we felt everyone sympathized with Palestine and demonized Israelis. At some point, we realized that each of our social media feeds was a virtual inverse of the others, and we were all practically laughing at this clusterfuck. We each shared fury at our own side's violent extremists and fury over their disinformation campaigns that seek to deepen our divisions. We saw and felt each other's humanity, saw and felt how very much we shared at this moment. At one point, the sister and I, who had nearly come to blows, were clutching each other's hands. She was gripping both of mine with both of hers, and vice versa. We were two women on a sidewalk, one wearing a keffiyeh and sporting fingernails painted to resemble the flag of Palestine, the other wearing a Star of David, passionately clasping hands and holding each other's gaze as we talked and talked. By the time we were ready to go separate ways, each one of them embraced each one of us, holding on for a very long time. Everyone except the brother was crying, but even his eyes were damp, and he and I hugged each other, not once, but twice. All of us promised to hold on to the memory of each other's faces and pain and humanity as we each go forward with our own activism. It was one of the most beautiful and healing experiences I have ever had, and it made me feel that so much is possible. There's that. But most people, and we know it, including ourselves, we don't know how to do that, and there are so many forces working upon us to keep us from each other, from connecting like that. And I don't know if a woman like Elle, who is so obviously special, a translator, as Alyssa called her, there aren't enough. I mean, it just is amazing that this encounter, which went almost, to two women physically fighting each other, ends up with them holding hands and hugging and crying together. The fact that we've gone so over the edge with our anger and our mistrust, and because we're living in our own little information silos, it becomes so hard to come together. One of the things that caused the near physical confrontation was the fact that the Palestinian women said that it had been debunked that Israeli women were raped and that people were burned alive and all of that, because that is what they were hearing from their side sources. That is not true. And yet I'm sure that some of what the other side, as Alyssa found out, believes is also not true. Hamas, this is one thing that just drives me crazy, though. And again, I want to speak to the lefties, if there's any left. Hamas continues to deny that its men sexually assaulted any Israeli women. They have said that's slander and it's lies. And that now is repeated over and over by their backers here, the young people in the streets and others. And so I've wondered what they all make of the fact that the United Nations, of all places, a place that, is rarely says anything good about Israel, did release a report earlier this week saying that, in fact, it was true. And yet, the kind of denialism that people engage in when something that is uncomfortable for their side, if you're pro-Palestinian, you want those videos and the reality of what Hamas did in Israel to go away. So you deny it ever happened. And we now know, looking at what's happened to the Republican Party, that a lie repeated becomes the truth. But what is mind-blowing to me is that so many of the women on the left, who in any other context would never disbelieve women who say they were abused. Now, there's not a lot of the abused women who are left to speak because they're dead and they died in horrible ways, gagged, clearly violated. This is from the UN report. Clear and convincing evidence that sexual violence, rape, torture, cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment occurred against women and children. But so many of them are dead. But the few who lived through it and experienced have not been believed. Because they need to believe that Israel is evil and can never be victimized. So the people there can never be victims. And yet, when you think of what these same women would say in terms of like the Me Too movement about you always believe a woman, which I think is bullshit, frankly. Again, it's too extreme. I'm so sick of the extremists and how these women, who in any other context would say, of course, if they're telling you they were raped, not to mention there's video of some of them, they were raped. And then to be able to discount that because they're Israelis, Jews. What does that say about the left, especially the women on the left? I've been needing to say that for some time. As the thing I read to you stated, honest critics of Israel, and I can be one, I too loathe Netanyahu, and I loathe those settlers, and I loathe all of those right-wing SOBs in Israel. But I don't loathe Israel. Honest critics of Israel's policies can raise serious objections, but they can't deny the horrific circumstances that set them in motion. So what we've got out there now are a lot of dishonest critics, a lot of people choosing to ignore realities they don't want to see because they're more intent on destroying the state of Israel. And when you deny atrocities, you set the stage for more. That's it for me, guys. I'm trying to think of a drinking, I don't need a drinking game. I'm going to drink through the whole damn thing. I just, as I said, hope that it doesn't get crazy. I hope it doesn't get totally crazy. But with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Boebert and who knows who else, well, the whole friggin' Republican Party in the House, I just can't begin to imagine. Anyway, Talk at you again on Monday. Have a good one.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.